Hello everybody. This is part two of the Animal Law Professionalism series, Creating a Meaningful Life in Animal and Other Areas of Law. Today, our webinar will specifically be on life from the inside, general counsels on the joys and challenges of serving as in-house counsel. So my name is Angelique Kamar, a third-year law student at West Virginia University Law School. I am the founder and president of the ALDF West Virginia University chapter. I am also the student vice chair for the ABA TIPS Animal Law Committee. So thank you so much for attending this program, which is hosted by the Tort Trial and Insurance Practice Sessions Animal Law Committee. We would like to thank our TIPS staff, especially Jean Emily DeBose, and co-sponsors the International Animal Law Committee, Law Practice Management Task Force, General Practice Solo Division, the Committee on Outreach to Law Students, and the Committee on Outreach to Young Lawyers for support of this program series. If you are interested in getting involved with any of these incredible committees, please reach out. So this program is not for CLE credit. It is instead a chance to learn more about the role of a general counsel, the journey of each panelist, and how to navigate unique intersections of animal law and nonprofit governance and organizational priorities and strategies. This is an interactive session, so please ask questions in the Q&A function and we'll do our best to answer it live. Finally, this program will be recorded, so please bear in mind when asking questions. So first off, I'd love to start by quickly introducing our amazing panelists that we have, and they've taken time out of their day to be here. So first off, we have Cynthia von Schlichen. Cynthia has been practicing law for over 15 years, including spending 8 years in private practice, engaging in civil litigation, trust and estate administration, contract drafting and disputes, and Social Security disability appeals. She's currently the general counsel for Farm Sanctuary. Cynthia has an LLM in animal law from Lewis and Clark Law School's Center for Animal Law Studies and is an adjunct professor for CALS, where she teaches nonprofit animal law and industrial animal agriculture. She recently contributed to the Elgar Concise Encyclopedia of Animal Law. She's also a regular speaker on animal rights issues. Next, we have Rebecca Huss. Rebecca joined Best Friends Animal Society as general counsel in July 2019. She's a professor from Valparaiso University Law School, a past chair of the American Bar Association's Tort Trial and Insurance Practice Sections Animal Law Committee. Rebecca was the 2011 recipient of that committee's Excellence in the Advancement of Animal Law Award and was a 2019 recipient of the Excellence in Animal Law Award from the Association of American Law Schools Animal Law Section. And finally, we have Tamara Bond. Tamara is a general counsel of Animals Asia Foundation, where she has led global legal strategy for more than 22 years across 13 legal entities worldwide, including a U.S. 501c3. Since joining Animals Asia, she has been at the forefront of international nonprofit law, guiding the organization's work in Asia on issues from sanctuary operations to advocacy before government bodies. She holds a JD from Georgetown University Law Center and is admitted to the Maryland Bar. She's a member of the ABA, including its animal law and international committees, and she is widely presented on animal welfare and nonprofit law. So we were going to have Jody Medoff as our other panelist, but unfortunately she did have a conflict arise. She will be available for the follow-up program, however. The follow-up program will be Meet the General Counsels on Wednesday, December 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can get the chance to meet the panelists from today's program and learn more about serving as in-house counsel. We also will have a special guest that day, Paula Cardozo. Paula Cardozo is Mercy for Animals General Counsel for Latin America. So we have such an incredible panel, and they encompass a diverse amount of elements like domestic and international elements and expertise in working with animals in agriculture, wildlife, and companion animals. So let's get started with our discussion. So my first question is, and this is to all the panelists, can you share your origin story? What led you to the role of general counsel? Tamara, would you like to start? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Um, so thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak to those who are interested in being general counsel and interested in animal law in particular. My journey started into animal law in a completely non-traditional way. I actually started out as an antitrust attorney. I was with the Federal Trade Commission doing multi-billion dollar mergers and then with Rogers and Wells Clifford Chance. Um, but ultimately, although I enjoyed the intellectual challenge, I just felt like I was making rich people richer. And so I went to a lawyer career advisor to consider switching out of law altogether. And after a battery of tests, he concluded that in fact I should be a lawyer. But the caveat was that I had to do something that was deeply meaningful to me to be fulfilled. So after that, I had the chance to move to Hong Kong, and I wanted to use my legal skills for something that was really meaningful to me. So I volunteered for Animals Asia Foundation in Hong Kong. And when I called up and offered free legal work, the director said, "Oh, we don't need a lawyer," which made me know that they absolutely needed a lawyer. And so my first day, I was given the biggest legal challenge the organization had had, and was able to resolve that in about 3 months of work, all pro bono. And after that 3 months, I was hired by Animals Asia Foundation. And so more than 22 years later, I'm leading the global legal strategy and working with our leadership boards. And I feel every single day like I'm making a difference.
Thank you so much. Rebecca?
So I'm gonna kind of skip over why animals for a minute and go more into why animal law. I was actually in-house at an animal health pharmaceutical company and health company prior to starting a teaching career as a law professor. And pretty shortly after I started as a law professor, it occurred to me that I was going to be spending a whole lot of time on research and writing. That's a big part of being a law professor. And so I decided I really wanted to do something I was passionate about, and that was related to animals. And so I was very fortunate that my law school allowed me to do research and writing in the area of animal law. I've been told by David Favor that he thinks that I'm David Favor, who's a well-known animal lawyer, that he thinks I'm the first American law professor to be granted tenure on the primarily on the basis of animal law scholarship. So it was very unusual at that time as an untenured professor to do this kind of unique, strange, fringe area of the law. But I was very fortunate that where I was at, they gave me the chance. I probably would have maybe thought about it differently if I'd realized how risky it was, but it turned out all right. So I had the opportunity to really understand and delve into the animal law areas while I was a professor in the research. And at the same time, I was able to continue to learn and get more knowledgeable about the areas related to being a generalist general counsel. I taught business associations, nonprofit law, contracts, all the things that I'm actually doing now. So I often say that I was uniquely suited to becoming general counsel of an animal advocacy organization because I had the animal law stuff on one side and I had all the legal general stuff that you need to have on the other side. So that's my how I got to this position.
I love that. You covered a lot of different aspects that sometimes people don't realize it does surface up. Cynthia?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks so much for having us for this great panel. So, my journey, and I promise not to, this is going to make it sound very long, but my journey begins when I was a child. I either wanted to be a lawyer or a musician my whole young life. But as a lawyer, first, it really kind of intimidated me. The idea of going to law school was intimidating. And second, I didn't have something I really believed in that I felt like I could fight for every single day. And I felt like there would be times when maybe I would be representing someone and I'd be feeling maybe lukewarm about their position or something, but knowing I still had to put my all into it as their counsel. And so that's one thing that kept me from pursuing a law degree. And so I went to school for music. And when I was about 25, I got really into animal rights. I became vegan and I just really educated myself about it and I became really passionate about it. And I actually worked as a vet tech at a couple of hospitals and I had a particularly really bad experience where the vet was euthanizing animals to get the weekend off. Like literally, she would say that and then euthanize an animal and tell the owner it was hopeless. It was a really disturbing experience. And I thought, at that point, I was like, that's it. This is my cause. If I am fighting for animals every single day, I'm never going to get tired of it. I'm never going to feel like the fight is frivolous. Like this is what I'm doing. So I went to law school and I started my school's chapter of the Student Animal Legal Defense Fund. I wrote every paper that I could choose the topic on something animal rights related. And then when I got out of law school, I worked in private practice for 8 years. And it wasn't initially what I wanted. I wanted to be in animal rights, but I was having trouble getting those opportunities. But I'm so glad in retrospect, sort of to Rebecca's point, that I didn't do that because I learned so much about how to be a lawyer in that space. And I might talk about that a little bit more later, but I kept connected to the animal rights world and volunteered for things and stayed active so that when the opportunity finally came up, I was there and I could take it. So I started at Farm Sanctuary as a staff attorney in 2019, which was my ultimate goal was to become an attorney for an animal rights organization. So amazing. And then in 2022, I was offered the role of general counsel, and I've been there ever since. And it's amazing.
Thank you so much. So I will move on to the next question. What has been the most meaningful or impactful thing you have done for animals in your career? And anybody can start.
I'll go ahead and start. Um, so one of the most meaningful moments in my legal career actually happened in Vietnam. There was a corrupt government official who convinced the Ministry of Defense to evict Animals Asia from our sanctuary there. Animals Asia rescues bears and other animals, and we had about 110 bears rescued in the sanctuary. And although we had a 20-year lease and millions of dollars invested, um, just overnight, everything was at risk. So I worked with an international arbitration lawyer, and we wrote something called a trigger letter, which is a letter that was sent to the Prime Minister of Vietnam to give him formal notice that if we were not able to negotiate, we would pursue arbitration at the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, which is under the auspices of the World Bank. And this sends a worrying signal to investors around the world that maybe Vietnam is not a good place to invest. So for months, our fundraising team, our team on the ground in Vietnam had gone out to embassies and to the public and used social media to get thousands of people to write to the Prime Minister to beg him to not evict us from our land. But once we sent the trigger letter to the Prime Minister, he overturned the eviction within 24 hours. And this really impacted me because our bears were able to remain safe. But it also showed me the incredible power of legal work, of working with contracts, with advocacy information. And why this was so meaningful to me is a few years earlier, I had been on a bear rescue where there was a bear called Truth. And Truth was emaciated. He was very, very ill and just barely clinging on to life. And when I looked into his eyes, I saw this dull, hopeless expression that he had really given up. And I, for the rest of my career, Truth has been at the forefront of my mind. He didn't survive, but once you've looked into the eyes of a suffering animal, you know that your work is meaningful and that you're making a difference. And that was the most meaningful experience in my career.
Thank you for sharing that, Rebecca.
So I'm gonna start off with a general and then provide two examples. The general thing is I think I was an academic for 20 years, and so I taught animal law, I wrote in animal law, and I really am hopeful that some of the students I taught, and I know some of the students I taught went on to do animal law, students who are now taking in the next generation of animal lawyers, that's really important to me. And hopefully my scholarship has also been helpful to people, based on what I've been told it has been. So that's great from a general perspective. The two specific situations are the first thing is while I was still an academic, I was appointed as a guardian special master in the Bad News Kennels case. That was the case involving Michael Vick, who was a football player, and it was a federal case. And the case that I was involved in was a case where the government was trying to determine what to do with animals that had been seized from property that had been used in dogfighting. And I went in and, went in with the idea that I was there to represent these animals. That was my job as the guardian special master of these particular animals. And it wasn't until afterwards that I have been told by folks that my being there and being part of that process really was impactful for other fight bust dogs in the future. But, I was very focused on these particular animals. That's the job that I had at that time. So people have told me that that's been impactful. The other thing that I'm going to raise is something that doesn't really have to do with animals, except, secondarily, similar to what we just heard, using something that you wouldn't necessarily think about is animal protective. A week after I started here at Best Friends, it became clear that there was going to be a mine set up across the road from our sanctuary. Our sanctuary is the heart of our organization, and it would have been very disruptive, if not eventually have resulted in the closing of the sanctuary from our perspective. It would have impacted our water rights. The organization ultimately had three kind of ways of approaching this issue. A legal perspective, which I was involved in, a potential PR campaign, like don't do this because you're going to shut down our sanctuary, and then a potential negotiated settlement where we resolve the issue by essentially buying out the mining rights so no one could mine across the road. Ultimately, we negotiated and bought out the land and bought the land and have now those mining rights. And so we resolved that issue. But again, that happened a week after I started, and I had to learn all sorts of things that I had no idea about water rights and air quality and sound, and everything really kind of came together. So it was definitely a trial by fire because again, it could have been the ultimate end of this sanctuary given the impact on the water. And those of you who are in the West know that water is really important. And so that's something that, again, I think, given the animals that not only are on site at the sanctuary, but because the sanctuary is the heart of this organization, I think that has been something very meaningful and impactful that I'm proud to have participated in to try to help.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, this was a tough question for me. I think back on, a whole lifetime, it feels like a lifetime of advocating for animals in this sphere. Um, with work with Farm Sanctuary, I think of Farm Sanctuary's role as a defendant intervener in the Prop 12 case that went to SCOTUS and upheld Prop 12. That was a really significant moment that not only benefits or upholds Prop 12, but it also sort of lays a foundation for other voter initiative laws like Q3. So really important, helping countless animals. I also think of like all of the rescue efforts. Even before I was general counsel, when I was staff attorney, it was my job to sort of facilitate the legal aspects of our rescues. Um, One rescue in particular was when I first started. I had only been at Farm Sanctuary for a few months, and it was during the pandemic, and it was in Florida, and it was supposed to be like 4 or 5 animals. Someone had come out the day before and assessed the situation and the whole thing. And then we went down there and it was over 100. It was like 140 animals. And we had to sort of work with other sanctuaries that we could find to figure out homes and placements and like ways to navigate rescuing all of these animals that were supposed to be less than 10. And I remember being on a Zoom call with my coworkers for about 10 hours that day, but it was so rewarding. All of those animals got rescued. And so that rescue really sticks out in my mind. But I think the number one thing I would say, the thing that has made the most impact on animals in my career is my decision to devote my career to animals. And I think that's immeasurable and it will continue to be the most significant thing I could have done or will do with regard to animal law and advocating for animals.
Thank you all so much. And, it's amazing to hear all of those different types of scenarios that created that impact, not only in your soul, your heart, but also in your career. So now moving on to the role of a general counsel, how is that unique compared to other legal positions? And Tamara, you can start.
Sure. What makes the general counsel role really unique is that the life of the organization really becomes your life with an organization like Animals Asia. And it's very key in the general counsel term, the word counsel, because in this role, you become the historian, the conscience, the mediator, the strategist, and you delve into every single aspect of the organization and its work. And knowing an organization so well and being able to support is deeply meaningful and incredibly fulfilling.
Thank you. Rebecca?
All right, I'm going to go a little more pragmatic and negative on this. Tamara, you were so right. I often talk about the fact that I look at the professional ethical rules that we're all subject to. And one of the things that we have to do as an attorney is act as an advisor. And sometimes your advice is not as welcome as you'd hoped, right? And so one of the things that I think those who are in the audience want to just be sensitive to is you as a general counsel have a professional ethical duty to the organization. And the good news is if you're passionate about the organization's mission, that's an easier call. But that also might mean that not only, and I think we'll be talking more about this later, not only does that mean that based on our prior conversations, I know all the panelists, we're pretty much on all the time, right? So because you want to make sure that the organization's okay, you want to support your colleagues and the mission of the organization. But the reality is that if there was an issue, I have a professional ethical responsibility to report it up to the board. And that may mean that I am no longer employed by this organization at some point. That is different than if you're in private practice and you have multiple clients. This is my only client, and I have a professional ethical obligation to the organization to do what's best for this organization. Now, I can do it with hopefully diplomacy, ensure that I am just explaining what the potential risks are, not being the quote Department of No, trying to ensure that my colleagues are able to do what they need to do to achieve the mission of the organization. But ultimately, that is something unique about the general counsel role.
Thank you, Rebecca. Cynthia?
Yeah, thank you. I think you both touched on really key aspects of being general counsel. I like not being the Department of No. I feel like the Debbie Downer of the organization on many occasions, but I think most people understand that that is my job, and you do have to strike a balance of like helping the organization do what it wants to do, but obviously not putting the organization in any sort of compromising position legally. So to sort of veer into a different direction, since both of those aspects were covered so well. I would say one of the things that makes being general counsel unique is the variety. Many attorneys have specializations. Like when I was in private practice, I worked for a firm that primarily did civil litigation, and that was our specialization. And you might have a family law practice or one that just does contract disputes or something like that. Or even in the case of animal rights organizations, you might have attorneys that only do advocacy litigation. But as the general counsel, and of course, this would vary depending on the organization because some have multiple attorneys, some like Farm Sanctuary, we have one attorney. Um, it would vary a little bit, but the general counsel in general really has to be prepared to handle sort of any kind of legal issue that might come along. And sometimes that means handling it yourself. Sometimes it means getting into outside counsel. Um, but for me, I mean, sometimes I really like my preference is always to sort of learn about the issue myself and sort of try to figure it out myself. Because not only do I learn and become a better attorney for the organization, also I potentially save the organization money because we don't have to get outside counsel. So I love that. I love learning new areas of law. I also know when it's something really, really niche and I want to get outside counsel. So you kind of have to weigh that. But in general, I just love the variety and the opportunity to learn new areas of law that can ultimately benefit animals and, of course, the organization.
Thank you. We applaud you for all that you do, and we appreciate those insights. My next question is, what personal and or professional lessons have you learned through your experience and role as general counsel? Tamra?
Thanks. I think one of the most important lessons that I've learned is even though you're general counsel of the organization, you need to be a team player. You need to really understand the other roles within the organization and everyone from the board to the bear carers. In order to best complete your role, you have to understand what the objectives are, what tasks your team is trying to accomplish in a very deep level. And doing that helps you be a better attorney. It helps you understand the facts more. It helps you to advocate strongly for the mission and for the different departments in your organization. It's also really important to know that sometimes you have to make decisions based on imperfect information. I relate a lot with Cynthia about so many areas of practice that you have to learn about and delve into that are unexpected and surprising. We've had crises that I've had to deal with from the legal perspective, everything from an earthquake at our China sanctuary to the government eviction order I spoke about earlier, to employee disputes. And we even had a hang glider accidentally land in our sanctuary in Vietnam one time, thankfully not where the bears were, that I had to handle from a legal perspective. So I've really learned that you need to stay calm, you need to use your good judgment, and those things are as important as your legal expertise.
Thank you. Rebecca, would you like to start?
Sure. A lot of things have already come up in our discussion today. I love Cynthia's discussion about the new things and that's again, I agree. One of the great things about being general counsel is I'm always learning something new because this organization, my people are very creative, and so they always bring me something new, and I'm always, having to intellectually be stimulated by that, but also as Tamara was saying, you're not going to have especially as a former academic, you don't have a semester to think about something and write it down with footnotes. You have an hour, if that, to help your organization make a decision. So something that I've learned just from being here is being more comfortable with that lack of information or the not having as much time as I would like, or just honestly being more comfortable with the gray. And my role again is not the Department of No, it is making sure that the decision makers at my organization know what the risks are. And if I can help mitigate those risks to help them and help the organization, but to recognize that there's going to be a lot of times that the contract might not be as pretty as I would like, or the decision, as Tamara said, you won't have all the information you would want because of time, or just the reality of, like Cynthia, I'm the only general counsel here. I don't have anybody in my line of supervision, and so I have to be recognized that I'm not going to be able to do things to the extent I might want to do in another circumstance. When I first was starting practice, I was at a large law firm, and one of the things that they talked about is the clients that they were with were very large companies. And so one of the things you would hear is the clients are coming to us for the Cadillac of, legal work. And I had to be comfortable sometimes producing legal work that's more forward, not maybe the highest level, not the prettiest. Maybe there's going to be a typo in that agreement, and just becoming comfortable with that. So that's both a personal and a professional. That was a very challenging thing for me to adjust to. But that's something that I think is the reality of a lot of in-house work. Everybody is under, you know, constraints, and we're all in nonprofits. We want the money to go to the animals. And so, like Cynthia was saying, there's some things that I'll send out to outside counsel, but if there's any way I can do it, I don't want to spend money on outside counsel. I want to use whatever I can to to make that decision, help my organization in a way that's the most efficient as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, Cynthia.
Yeah, totally. It kills me to pay for outside counsel. I think most of our leadership team would be able to tell you that. Like, I will go to the ends of the earth to try to avoid it. I think it hurts me more than it even hurts them when I come to them with a bill. Um, so yeah, I totally appreciate that. And I think also like just when I have unknowns, when I'm forced to look at something and make a decision and not have all the information and there's, a large amount of risk assessment going on there, I really try to like lay that out too. So I say, this is generally what I'm thinking. These are unknowns. This is the risk, that kind of thing, just so the organization has all the information um, surrounding my decision. So I agree with all of that. Along those lines, one of the professional lessons I've learned is that I can figure things out most of the time if I put on the effort to educate myself. I really love the practice of law. Even when I was in private practice and it wasn't my goal, I still enjoyed it because I just genuinely like the practice of law. So I like trying to figure all the stuff out. Also, I've learned some best practices working with staff. At Farm Sanctuary, we have about a staff of about 100. And I hope that my approach to working with staff has made them feel more comfortable, that they will be more transparent when there is a potential issue coming up that they don't understand. So I think lawyers are inherently scary. And so, you don't want to seem like, loosey-goosey, like you're a pushover, but you also don't want the staff to be afraid of you, I think, because then they're not going to come to you when something's awry or they have to ask a question. So I really try to be very approachable with the staff. I also try to give them a why when I tell them that we need to do a certain thing. For example, I give a presentation on our contracts policy. And the first thing I say is, why? Why do you have to do this? Rather than just saying, do it. Because I feel like if they have an understanding for why the contracts are important, maybe they're more likely to say, oh, you know what? We do need a contract for this. We have to reach out to Cynthia, that kind of thing. So I just want to be approachable and I want them to, whenever possible, I know it can't always be that way, but whenever possible, help them to understand why I'm saying we need to do a certain thing. And that way they'll feel more comfortable. And then when they have a question or something that needs to be done, they'll come to me rather than just kind of like handle it on their own, which is my worst nightmare. So
Thank you all for touching upon such important aspects and sharing the realities of in-house counsel work. So, my next question is geared towards mentors in your life. And as a side note, for those interested, the Animal Law Committee offers an opportunity to become a mentee through our mentoring program that we offer. Our Animal Law Committee members are mentors for our mentees. So, question to all the panelists. Can you share how mentorship has guided your career and the difference it's made in your professional life? Tamara, would you like to start?
Sure. Um, I've had many important mentors at different stages in my career, whether it's been at law school or at a government entity, or at Animals Asia. And those haven't always been official mentorships, but they've been having relationships with people who were willing to share their insights and their wisdom, and to teach. And I've been really, really lucky that I've had so many of those examples in my life. I especially wanted to highlight our founder and CEO of Animals Asia, who's Jill Robinson, because she has, working in many, many countries, has so much cultural understanding, so much patience, and so much grit in the face of unbelievable obstacles. And I think that the qualities that she models every day are something that I aspire to as a leader and as to a lawyer.
Thank you. Rebecca?
So one of the things I was thinking about when I was thinking about this question is it actually really flows for me into the next thing I think we were going to be talking about, which was the role of the ABA and TIPS Animal Law Committee. A couple of things. One, I don't necessarily think some of the people that I would consider to be mentors to me are lawyers. And I think Tamara is a good example, provided another example of that. The people that you have had the opportunity to interact with, regardless of whether they're lawyers or not lawyers, you can pull and learn from them in lots of different ways. And so again, things like how do I work in this particular organization in an effective way? I'm not, again, general counsel, legal department of one with a little bit of side help. I'm having to look to others for that. On the ABA TIPS Animal Law Committee side, the people I've interacted with through the Animal Law Committee have been really transformative in the sense of I call upon them when I have questions. Some of the things that they've done, I have looked at as potential ways that I can approach things. Um, One of the reasons why I really like the Animal Law Committee and TIPS in particular is I found, as somebody who, has been involved for over 20 years now with the animal, well, as soon as it started, as soon as the Animal Law Committee started, that unlike some, I think, situations and bar associations, TIPS is small enough that you can really come in and become involved early on and start seeing the same people at meetings and start interacting with the same people. For many, many years, I was a member of the Public Service Committee for TIPS. And so I was able to interact with people that weren't in animal law and, practiced in lots of different fields. And from my perspective, that type of involvement, that type of community has been really important just to make me feel like I'm not alone. I was the only person at my school that did animal law for 20 years. So it's kind of isolating. You need your animal law community for that. And, again, I'm really the only person in my line of supervision here that does legal work. So having people that I know are doing some of the same things, that type of thing really does help me feel less alone, I guess.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Rebecca. Cynthia?
yeah, so when I thought about this question, two attorneys, they were attorneys, actually came to mind for me when I was in private practice. They came from two different firms. The first one was the head of the firm where I worked. It was my first job out of law school. And the second one was a colleague who was much more seasoned than I was at the second firm I worked. And coincidentally, they were both named Robin. I don't know if they're listening, probably not. But they were both just really mentored me. I really learned a lot of the tools of the trade working with them. And then also just on personal level, I felt like they were very supportive in an industry, especially in law firms where you support can be lacking, to put it politely. So I really appreciate that. I still think about them. I still apply a lot of things that I learned from them just in my day-to-day work. Now that am a seasoned attorney and we're always learning, I feel like this is really my opportunity to be a mentor for people coming into this field. It's a really tough field for a lot of different reasons. And I had such a hard time getting in for so long. I mean, I practiced for 8 years. And then I actually did some other work before I actually finally got to my goal of working as an attorney for an animal rights organization. So I really want to be a place where they can come to talk about their struggles and their insecurities and whatever it might be, and assure them that this can be done and that if they put in the work, they will get this opportunity, they'll get there.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I know Rebecca has already touched upon the next question and the involvement with the ABA, specifically the Animal Law Committee, and how it supported your professional growth. Tamara, Cynthia, would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, I can chime in really just a little bit. It's funny just to throw it out there. I was sort of didn't appreciate the value of joining the Bar Association for a long time. And then I joined the ABA and the Animal Law Committee, and it is amazing. And I tell everyone who's coming into this field or who's been in the field and they're just not members that they absolutely should join if they have an interest because it is invaluable. Like Rebecca said, it is like this community of pretty much everyone who's doing this work, and you can get to know everyone and learn about what they're doing and learn about opportunities to help. And it is just so, so invaluable. And I think the mentor-mentee program is really great. And I think I can't imagine doing this work and not being a member of the Animal Law Committee.
Thank you, Cynthia. Tamara?
Yeah, I for many years I practiced in Hong Kong, for 16 years actually for Animals Asia, and was not involved in the American Bar Association. But when I came to the US, I found that I was very drawn in to the similarities with other lawyers, to their insights and their perspective. Being a general counsel can be very isolating at times because you have to make really difficult decisions that aren't always popular and stand by those decisions, even in the face of resistance. And being able to talk to colleagues around the animal welfare sector who understand those challenges and have insights that can provide me with some hope is so invaluable.
Thank you. I will add, starting in my law school, there is no animal law program, and the ABA ALC changed my life. It's changed my direction. So anybody listening who's not part of it, highly, highly recommend joining. You will meet incredible people with high levels of expertise in this field. So I will move on to advice or guidance that you can give someone who is either in the law field already in a different field, or a law student, or anybody else who's just interested in working in house counsel or aspiring to become a general counsel. Tamara, would you like to start?
Sure. Um, the practice of law requires a very particular type of thinking and thought process. The analytics, the problem solving, the addressing situations that you've never seen or heard of before, and using your research and your wit about you to find answers. And so I encourage young lawyers or people who want to start out in animal law to first have the experience in a training environment where you're working with more senior lawyers, more experienced lawyers, who can pass on their knowledge and their their way of thinking. So whether that's at a law firm or at a government agency or another organization where you have a lawyer who can provide you some insights into their experience, I really recommend having that as a foundational step, which will serve you so well in the years that come.
Thank you, Rebecca.
So obviously you need to think about this from a professional development perspective, getting the skills that you need, being able to respond. Cynthia said, don't give up. I would agree with that. There's studies that show that especially women look at a job description, and if they don't meet every single one of the criteria, they don't even apply. I would encourage you to try, try and apply, especially people who might feel like they're marginalized and might not have had the opportunity to have some of the background that other candidates would have had. I think the bigger picture issue is, and we haven't talked too much about kind of our day-to-day, routines. And I think one of the things about being a general counsel is you don't get routines. You think you know what you're going to be doing for the day, and then it turns out you're doing something totally different that day. But think about whether you would really kind of, from a personality, from a mental health perspective, be comfortable in-house as a general counsel. Being in-house is sometimes different than being general counsel, as Cynthia has said. Depending on the organization, you might be able to be very specialized. But having to become comfortable with being flexible and not just what you're doing that day, but also you think you're going to be focusing on this issue today, you're going to be doing this contract issue, but instead you're dealing with an HR issue that, or a wage and hour issue, maybe more specific than that. So having that flexibility, and we've also talked about kind of the interaction that you're going to have with people. I often think of myself as being that duck smoothly going on the water, but the rapid, feet underneath. You don't want to let other people know how freaked out you are about something going on. You want you want to be that calm, we're going to get through this, let's take it step by step person, because that's what your role is from my perspective. So if your personality is not able to do that, this might not be a comfortable place for you. That's a skill that can be learned to some extent, but that's part of it. The other kind of final thing about being a general counsel, if I'd like you to think about is, and this is something that I've seen in the animal world. A lot of people who go into the animal, advocacy and rights world, they really are passionate about animals. They don't necessarily enjoy people very much, right? And one of the things about being general counsel is you are interacting with people all the time, all the time. And as Cynthia was talking about telling her staff the why, you need to get them to be on board with what you're doing. So there's so many people skills that you need to have as a general counsel. If you're in for example, a large law firm and you're in a very specialized area of the law, you might be able to sit in your office or sit in your remote, computer and do the work. But as general counsel, you're going to have those people skills to be able to interact with people. And like Cynthia, I interact with people at every level of my organization, from my chair of the board to, an animal caretaker in one day. And so having those skills, I think, is really helpful.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Cynthia, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I love all of that. I could go on forever about this topic, I think. But just sort of, I guess this goes back to a little bit about what Tamara said, but you kind of both said this, but definitely consider working. I say the real world, but I don't even mean the real world. Obviously, this is the real world, but I think the value of working with seasoned attorneys as a lawyer and really learning how to be a lawyer is super important, especially if you're thinking about becoming general counsel. I was in private practice, as I said, for about 8 years, and I didn't want to be there. And I, I was like fighting it tooth and nail. It wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to end up at an organization. Like that's what I wanted to do. But I actually, I learned so much in private practice. And If somehow, and I don't know what fool would have given me this job, but if somehow someone had given me a general counsel job without that private practice experience, I mean, there are no words to convey how ill-equipped I would have been for the job. I would have no idea what I was doing. That private practice work has made me what I hope as a valuable attorney for my organization and for the movement today because I put in all that time. I worked with seasoned attorneys. I really learned how to be a lawyer. And you might be able to do that with an organization that has a big team of lawyers. But if you don't have that opportunity, really consider just going out there and just doing the grunt work, working for a firm or government agency, and honing your craft. It will make you so much more of a force when it comes time, your big opportunity comes to do this kind of work. But yes, and like Rebecca said, personality is also key for sure. And I remember in a law firm, it's totally okay to be like the barky, crabby attorney who sits in their office and only opens the door to like bark out an order or something. But that's not what this is. And that's not going to be effective or useful in this space. So you want to make sure that you're really willing to talk with everyone, to take the time to explain things when that's appropriate, to have a lot of patience at times. Yeah, all of that is super important.
Thank you all so much. That's very, very helpful advice to those that are listening and are inspired by what you guys are saying. So my next question is, what is unique about your organization, and how do you approach specifically risk management in your role as general counsel? Tamara, you can start.
Thanks. One thing that's really unique about Animals Asia is our international footprint. We're in 9 countries around the world, and we have so many challenges related to different jurisdictions. And you have to know yourself enough and have the humility to realize that with all your learning and all your research, you cannot know everything about every jurisdiction in which your organization works. And so you have to reach out for help. And I feel the same way as Rebecca and Cynthia, that I I really hate to rely on outside counsel. When I do, I try to get pro bono arrangements and discount arrangements. But those relationships with trusted lawyers around the world are absolutely essential to my work at Animals Asia. And being able to reach out to someone in Vietnam and say, hey, I've got this legal issue. I'm not as familiar with it. Could you help me out? Could you give me some guidance? And just being able to say, okay, I can't know everything. And just being willing to listen to others, maybe in your industry, maybe even not, who can provide advice and can provide some guidance.
Thank you. Rebecca?
So again, I'm going to go to the next question as we talk about this. So the first thing about being unique to our organization, I was thinking about this before we met today. I think one of the amazing things about being a nonprofit attorney in an organization where you feel passionate about the mission is that most of the people who you're interacting with, if not all, are also there because they're passionate about the issue. I went to a in-house counsel conference the first year I was general counsel, and I met some really lovely people who were doing in-house work in lots of industries. And the thing I really came away was, thank goodness I am doing the work I'm doing in an organization where I feel passionate about it. Now, sometimes that passion means they're more willing to take risks than you might be comfortable with. And so that's part of the learning. It's not your personal comfort level for risk, it's theirs. Cynthia's already talked about making sure that they know the why and know what we don't know, where it could go. Doesn't mean we know everything, doesn't mean it couldn't turn out totally differently. So just being that person to help them manage that risk. The other thing about my organization is that even though we're a pretty large organization now, we still have founders of the organization that are still very active in the organization. And so the the guiding principles that this organization follows are really at the heart of everything. That may mean that it is more willing to take risk, even though larger organizations sometimes are willing to take less risk because they're still always focused on those 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 things that will help achieve the mission. They're not going to be as concerned about what's going to happen 50 years from now. They want to help the animals today. And I think actually both of the other panelists are in organizations that probably have kind of similar mission focused ideas.
Right. Thank you, Rebecca. It definitely touches upon, having live animals in your organization's sanctuary or shelter. And I know a lot of the panelists here, they have that experience. Cynthia, why don't you go ahead and speak on that?
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to call attention to your point, Rebecca, about the founder still being involved. Gene Bauer is our founder, and he is still leading the organization. So he's very much involved, and his passion never wanes. It always amazes me. He's been at this for such a long time, and he still calls me all the time, like excited about a new idea, a new way we can help animals. So that's energizing and amazing. It can be challenging from a legal perspective, but yeah, I love that. And I definitely understood that point. So one of the other things that I think makes Farm Sanctuary unique, and I think probably you could all say this, is we have a set of components that kind of vary wildly with regard to what we have to be mindful of. So we do a lot of advocacy work via policy, via litigation, humane education. We do a lot of that. But we also have two farms, one on each side of the country. And New York and California have very different rules, believe me. And the farms not only bring in significant rescue component and all the logistics tied to that, but also the care of literally hundreds of farmed animals and the care and compliance required to maintain their home, the farms. So it's a lot going on at one time and a lot to be aware of. Each aspect of the work, whether it's the education, the advocacy, the rescue, it all has its own set of challenges, and we have to be mindful of all of it collectively and separately. So I think that's something that makes the risk management tough and the organization kind of unique.
Thank you. And the next question is for Tamara and Cynthia. How do you handle the complexity of being in the international sphere? What are some unique challenges? How do you navigate different cultures? And Tamara, I'd love for you to start.
Great. So international work is challenging, like from a practical perspective, and then from a legal practice perspective. From the practical side, I have 2 a.m. meetings. I have midnight meetings because I've got people in the UK, I've got people in China, and we need to be able to communicate regularly. And it often has to take place in those time zones where our sanctuaries are, where we have the biggest legal challenges and we have the the most need for risk assessment for the safety of the animals, for the safety of visitors, and operationally to make sure we're compliant with the jurisdiction's requirements. Another challenge about practicing internationally is some of the countries we work in, for example, China and Vietnam, policy can change on a dime, and that completely impacts our work. And you have to be ready and fluid and basically flexible enough to take on those changes very quickly and to make sure that you're giving advice based on the new information, but also keeping to the mission of the organization.
Thank you. And Cynthia?
Yeah, so I'll just touch on this a little bit. We technically Farm Sanctuary is not an international organization. I would say we have an international presence. I speak at conferences somewhat regularly internationally. I was at Oxford this past summer at their animal ethics summer school speaking, and people always know about Farm Sanctuary, and they always come up and say, like, ask about it and everything. So there's definitely a presence, and because of that, we have had we do get some fairly regular media opportunities that are overseas. So with that, we just have to kind of be mindful. of rules like GDPR and things like that, things that we don't normally have to be concerned about in the US, but we have to make sure that we are abiding by all of those laws, wherever the particular meeting opportunity might be. The other way that we sort of touch upon international is we will sometimes hire independent contractors from other countries. And that always requires research on that country's independent contractor laws, because that would be the law that would govern or dictate the contract and all of that. So that's something we have to be aware of. And that has come up in numerous occasions. And again, I kind of enjoy that. I take it as an opportunity to say, oh, great, I can learn all about, what it's like to hire someone who lives in Colombia, or something like that. So it's an opportunity to learn more and to be stronger for the organization. But yeah, that's the way that we really touch on the international. Obviously, Tamara does way more than we do in that space.
Thank you for providing that insight. So my next question is, how can aspiring animal law attorneys balance the financial strain of student loans with their desire to pursue meaningful work in public interest? And I do want to remind the audience, you can definitely send in your questions. We will be approaching the end of this program. So I have a couple more questions, but feel free to send them on. So Tamara, I'd love for you to start on this.
Thanks, Anjali. Nonprofit practice is rarely where the big money is for attorneys. So you have to be prudent. You have to be a planner when you consider this type of role. There are a lot of lawyers that get financial breathing room by doing side jobs with public service loan forgiveness and long-term budgeting. One thing I was gratefully able to do going to law school was to pay the tuition on a monthly basis so that I didn't have any student loans when I graduated, which I was so grateful for. But the really important thing is to be very clear-eyed about your finances and being open to a career that inspires you, even though you might not make as much money as at a law firm. But with planning and flexibility, it's entirely possible to have a nonprofit career and be general counsel and to do that meaningful work without having to sacrifice financial well-being.
Thank you. Rebecca?
So I want to reiterate the public loan forgiveness programs. I would encourage you to talk to your career planning law school office. There's lots of law schools that actually have programs in addition to the federal program. And so check out all the resources in advance, like way before you're looking for jobs. The second thing is, as Cynthia said, you may need to get just a job to learn how to be a lawyer for a while. And I would encourage you to treat that as an opportunity to, if you have loans, to pay down those loans, to get yourself in a more comfortable financial situation. I worked at large law firms before I started teaching, and part of the reason why I'm grateful I did that, in addition to just getting the legal experience, was I had the opportunity to then pay down my student loans before I started teaching people who are taking out student loans. The other thing is, one of the interests I had when I was an academic, and is still an interest of mine, is attorney well-being. And again, lots of studies have shown that it's really important to have purpose. And so if you think about long term, where you want to be, not just in 10 years or 20 years, but do you want to be healthy mentally and physically? Now, granted, general counsel, in-house counsel, nonprofit work can be really stressful and really demanding. But at the end of the day, if you have purpose, that really does, I think, help with ensuring that having meaning in your life at the end of the day can be helpful. The reality is it's really tough. I know that law students are graduating with a lot in loans and it can feel very overwhelming, but I want you to explore the opportunity to get the resources you can from your law school and from organizations like the American Bar Association and your state bar associations, because everybody knows it's a huge stressor. want to make sure that you're doing what you need to do to stay healthy, again, both mentally and physically.
Thank you, Rebecca. Cynthia?
Yeah, I think both of you just gave some great insight on that. I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. The only thing I would say is just to manage expectations. So, if this is the kind of work you really want to do, then you just keep in mind that like you're not gonna be, buying a yacht by your third year or anything like that. You're gonna have the money that you need. I think for the most part, you will have the money that you need to have financial well-being, as Tamara said, but you're not going to be rich necessarily. But like Rebecca said, you will be rich in spirit because you'll be doing something you really believe in. The whole culture is just different versus a law firm. And I actually worked for some nice people at law firms. It wasn't, as stereotypical as you might think. I mean, a lot of the people were really lovely and supportive, but it is a different thing. And law firms are generally driven by money. And nonprofits are not driven by money, they're driven by the mission, which requires money. And that's really a night and day thing. So that is sort of probably the way you will be paid back the most. But as far as the logistics of like actual financial stuff, all the programs that you all talked about, all these sort of options for paying down your loan and managing it, are totally viable. And then again, just managing expectations and knowing that you're not going to be coming into this super lucrative career from a financial perspective, but you'll be fine. You'll be okay.
Thank you all so much. As a law student, I really appreciate your insights and everybody else in the audience. So I have a Q&A question from somebody. They're asking, how has working in this arena affected your dietary choices based on what you've learned and the impacts of the food system on animal welfare? I'd love Cynthia to start on that.
Yeah, it's a great question, but honestly, I've been vegan for 25 years and I became vegan in 2000. And I guess you could all do the math there. But I became vegan in 2000. I became vegetarian in 1996. So it has been a long time. So I was already on that path when I came to work at Farm Sanctuary in 2019. It was like, old news by then for me, but it certainly reminds me daily of why I've made those decisions. And, I've never once looked back or even nostalgically pondered a hamburger or something like that. It doesn't even seem like food to me anymore. And constantly encountering those injustices at work all day long, every day, certainly confirms my decision to do that.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm gonna hop in here. Similarly, I was a vegetarian and then a vegan more than 25 years ago now. I'm a little bit older than you, I think, Cynthia. And again, I feel really privileged to be part of an organization. When I was an academic, I was always the only person who followed a vegan diet at everything, and I ate a lot of hummus at events because that was the only thing that you could eat. But best friends, one of our we have very few org-wide policies. We have like 16 org-wide policies, all the ones you would think about, no harassment, that type of thing. But one of our policies is that all food that we serve is vegan. And so I finally can eat when I go up to our sanctuary and there's a lunch. We have a vegan lunch buffet every day. And it really is, it's again, a real privilege to be part of an organization where I'm not the one vegan. I'm not that you have to be a vegan to work for an organization or a vegetarian, but it's again part of that guiding principles of kindness. And that even though our organization is very focused on companion animals, shelter animals, it is kindness to the world, including obviously kindness to the other sentient beings in our world. Again, very very fortunate that I'm in a place where I'm with my people, so to speak, on that. Um,
I love that. Thank you so much. Tamara, would you like to chime in?
Sure. So coming from private practice, from antitrust law and corporate law, I hadn't really had the opportunity to think a lot about where our food came from. I grew up in sort of a meat and potatoes family, in a farming environment, a hunting environment, which always felt very uncomfortable to me, but I didn't have the words as a child um, to put to that discomfort. And I was really struck by Jeremy Bentham's question that he asked: um, Can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? And that statement had such a huge impact on me, that your choices are determining whether animals suffer or not. And even the smallest choices, sometimes we encourage people to be vegetarian or vegan once a week as a start, and then expand on that. Like every choice you make not to consume animals makes a difference in this world. And um, I I just feel so strongly that we need to be so aware of the impact of our choices.
Thank you.
You know, can I just follow up on that? One of the things I think sometimes, quote, animal people get in trouble with is being judgmental, or the perception that we're being judgmental. And so, one of, again, best friends' tenets is kindness. So I think it's helpful to help educate people about the impact of their choices, as Tamara would say, but also recognize, as Tamara was talking about, everybody's coming to this from their own story. Everybody has their backstory. And I will say that, I also, Tamara, grew up in the Midwest, meat and potato family. And I often tell people, if somebody like me, meat and potato family, big firm lawyer, can get vegetarian and vegan, anybody can get there. Everybody's on their own path, though, and trying to make sure everybody understands this is reality, this is the impact. You're making your choices, and making sure that they're supported in making the choices that will be less destructive for our planet and obviously reduce the suffering of our animals, right?
Yeah, if I can add to that, one of Farm Sanctuary's primary philosophies is to meet people where they are. So it's kind of the same thing. We're obviously a vegan organization, and our mission talks about promoting vegan living, but we still appreciate people in their journey and sort of appreciate that approach. I think that is so important. And I think if you just come off as sort of lecturing people or judgmental, then you sort of just alienate people. And I've personally, for me, in my personal life, I have had more people become vegan, including my husband and my dad, because they were by example. I wasn't lecturing them. I wasn't making them feel bad about it. They just sort of figured it out on their own by seeing what I was doing. So yeah, definitely.
Having really great food options that are
All
vegan,
right, that too.
you know,
For
yeah.
sure.
When I was asked, when I was in a situation where I was mostly the only vegan, why are you a vegan? I would normally start with, it just makes me feel good on lots of levels. And if they
Yeah,
wanted more information, I'm happy to share.
right.
But most of the time when you're getting that question, it's not coming from a place of genuine curiosity.
No, it's not.
Thank you for that insight. Coming from a law school where I think I'm the only one that presents these type of options, there are a lot of people that are now thinking about these options that do exist. Because the ALDF, we only offer vegan foods, and for the first time, I'm seeing transformation in students and seeing that these opportunities are available, and we can see the injustice behind it. So I would love to wrap up and say thank you so much to our wonderful panelists on a fascinating conversation. I would love to hear from our audience if they have any more questions. This would be a good time for our Q&A. And as you guys are adding those questions in, one question that I'd love to ask the panelists is how are you navigating the integration of artificial intelligence within your organization from a legal and ethical perspective? And anybody can chime in at any moment. I'll have Rebecca start with this.
So obviously, everybody knows that the legal profession is changing because of AI, but I always viewed AI, and I continue to view AI as just another tool. It's not going to replace lawyers. Lawyers are always going to need to advise. AI is not perfect in the legal field for sure yet. Everything you get, you really do need to double check. So that's from a professional perspective. Obviously, as an organization, we actually, it was one of the things on our organizational goals this year is to incorporate more AI to make people more efficient and effective and to honestly help us again achieve our mission. So ensuring that we have, and obviously I was involved in putting together our AI policy, helping the people who are working with the tools that we use, ensure that people know how to use them as the question says, legally and ethically. That's just part of kind of the general counsel role is anything that we're using in this organization, making sure that we're doing it in a way that's, again, hate to say it, but consistent with our values.
Thank you. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Okay.
Sorry.
Um, or shall I give Tamara a break? She's always like one of the first ones. So I would say that I'm pretty much a skeptic of AI. I think it has its place, but I feel like law is not that place. And this is just me personally, but I feel like a field where accuracy and credibility are paramount. I'm not inclined to rely on or even consult AI because it hasn't shown to be, as Rebecca said, it has not shown to be consistently accurate or reliable. And that's just not a chance I'm willing to take. That's in my name and in the organization's name. And I always like to conduct a little test when I am going onto Google to begin to research something, and then the AI response will helpfully come up. I always like to see if it's right or not. And it's often wrong. I mean, it's just, it would be really scary if I was relying on that. And obviously, you would check your work and everything, but I think the world is getting lazy about that at times and kind of just being like, oh, great, this is the answer, and sort of just saying that that's the truth, and it's not always. So I'm pretty skeptical. I think our organization is being responsible about it. I certainly think, there is good that comes from it, but like everything we in the world, we tend to over abuse things that are new and shiny. So yeah, just being conscientious.
Yeah, can I just add one of the things I think that people who get very excited about AI and its use, even things like meeting note-taking things,
Yes.
again, aren't very accurate sometimes. As a general counsel, making sure that you're making sure that they know the unintended consequences of that. Whether
Yeah.
that is if the note taker is on in a meeting that it shouldn't be on because it should be, a confidential meeting. I am always watching on that side of the panel when I'm in meetings. Is there an AI note taker? This isn't a meeting I want to have recorded because this is something that I don't want there to be maybe something discoverable or
Yeah.
it could be misinterpreted. And not that there hasn't been recording of meetings for a long time, but AI note taking and transcripts are one of the things that just unintended consequences, just being aware of those unintended consequences is really something that I try to make sure my people are aware of.
For sure.
Um,
Tamara?
so from my perspective, Animals Asia has really jumped on board with the AI technology and using it as a tool in so many facets of our work, from fundraising to making plans for bear care. And as Rebecca and Cynthia both mentioned, you have to look at it as a tool, almost like as an assistant who can provide foundational insights, but everything needs to be checked, everything needs to be verified. And there's no replacement for a human in the room or a lawyer in the room to make those judgment calls on what AI is telling you. And from an ethical standpoint, we run into a lot of interesting questions. For example, one of our policies is that we will not create AI images of our bears in our marketing. We want to make sure that every image is authentic, that every place a bear is in is authentic and true to what they're doing. Just little things like that create these ethical and moral questions of how do we want to integrate AI in a way that's useful for the organization, but also maintains the principles and the values that you as a lawyer and the organization have.
Thank you. I mean, being in a world where AI is now emerging, I should say it's already here and just getting refined further and further. It is so interesting to hear how you all navigate that. And now we have a question from the audience. And I think this is just a general question, not specific to AI, but how can non-lawyers get involved with your organizations or help contribute the furtherance of your missions?
Well, I don't know about Cynthia and Tamara, but we have lots and lots of volunteers, and our website talks about all the opportunities. You know, you don't need to be a lawyer to do things that are supportive of for example, to get information about how shelters are doing in jurisdictions that don't publish that information. We have Freedom of Information Act requests if you're more interested in kind of the legal-ish stuff, but there's lots and lots of volunteer opportunities for people to get involved in my organization, and I would encourage you to do that. I will say that when you're thinking about where, you know, whether you want to be in-house, what organizations, volunteering for organization first and just kind of seeing what their culture is and seeing what they're really doing on the ground is really helpful.
Yeah, and kind of I chime in on that. Not only is it helpful in that way, but it's helpful for your career as well. My very first job in animal rights, I got because, and it was before I was a lawyer, but I got it because I volunteered for the American Anti-Vivisection Society because it was near where I lived, and I volunteered there for 2 years. And when a position became open, they just called me and offered me the job, and I was like off and running. So it's really valuable in that way too, but also super valuable. I would also say farm sanctuaries, volunteer opportunities, and we have such a wide, as Rebecca and Tamara, as you both do in your organizations, have such a wide breadth of everything that we do. There's almost like something for everyone. So lots of opportunities to volunteer, to get involved, and then even if it's just sort of on peripheral, you want to be involved, you can. Respond to calls to action, lots of sort of advocacy work in that way. We also have events, you can come to events. You can just go to our website and there's so much information about factory farming and about animals, good and bad, on there that you can learn about and get involved that way. So, I mean, there's so much you can do.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Rebecca and Cynthia on that. Animals Asia has a lot of volunteer opportunities throughout the world, everything from support groups to people volunteering as vet assistants in our sanctuaries. Um, One of the biggest things that surprised me in going into animal welfare nonprofit law, having come from a private background, was that we aren't really hugging bunnies all day and frolicking through fields with grateful animals. There's a lot of challenging work that requires intellect and requires good judgment. And I would say that it's important to know what your skills are. And if you're interested in a particular organization, call up and offer your skills. Don't necessarily go by what positions are posted, but be creative and tell the organization what you can do for them and how you can use your very unique qualities to help in the movement and the mission for that organization.
Thank you all so much. That's very, very helpful. And I don't believe we have any other questions. So thank you so much. Oh, looks like we do. Last minute. So okay, so this is very specific. So Tamara, what work do you do with orangutans, and do you coordinate with any orangutan foundation?
We don't actually work with orangutans. We work with bears. We rescue elephants. We work to improve the welfare of dogs and cats, and also work on captive animal welfare for animals that are used for performances in zoos and safari parks. So I can't really comment knowledgeably on orangutans, but I think that the the vast array of animals that Animals Asia supports and helps is really meaningful to me.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And I don't see any other questions now. Oh, well, okay. Um, what trends are you noticing in the area lately? I believe what they're trying to aim at is just animal law in general. What are the trends, the emerging ones? And this is open to all panelists.
So I'd like to jump in on that, especially working in a cross-cultural and international space. The the countries that a lot of people have thought of as being difficult for animals, challenging for animals, not having a lot of animal welfare protection, are completely changing course. China, for example, protecting the environment is one of their biggest needs. They're reducing the species of animals that can be used in traditional Chinese medicine. They're starting to think about welfare issues, and the public is really driving that. They're really crying out against cruelty to animals, and that is influencing the leadership within the countries. So for me, just seeing this swell of concern and care about animals throughout the world is so inspiring to me, and it's one of the reasons is because I think it's challenging when you're in a culture that hasn't had a lot of legal cases or a lot of law related to animal welfare, that people stand up for what they believe in and are trying to make a difference in any way they can, even if it's just writing a post or responding to a blog. Um, and so I'm so grateful at this time in animal law to see those changes taking place.
Thank you. Would any other panelists like to chime in on that? All right. Well, thank you so much. I'll say this again. I don't think I have any questions. Thank you so much for our audience for those wonderful questions. And before we conclude this program, I would like to give Rebecca the opportunity to speak about our follow-up program that I did touch upon earlier. And this will happen on December 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern. And as I said, this program will be a chance to meet the general counsels and learn more about their role. So go ahead, Rebecca. Why don't you chime in on that?
So we talked about mentorship earlier, and I think this will be an opportunity. The program on the 3rd won't be recorded. And so if you have a question, it's not just going to be myself, Cynthia, and Tamara, but as was said at the top of the program, Jody Medoff and the Mercy for Animals General Counsel for Latin America, Paula Cardozo, is also going to be there. So it will be an opportunity to ask kind of maybe your specific questions. We have other things that we can talk about. It's really a program to help you, once you've had an opportunity to kind of think about things a little bit, to come back to us and ask questions. We'll see how it goes. It might go an hour, it might go less than that. It's really just an opportunity for you to ask follow-up questions in an informal environment.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Okay, so again, thank you once again to everyone, especially James Jeswaldi, Jean DeBose, and so many more for making this event happen. There will be more programs to this professionalism series in the future, so please keep an eye out. Again, thank you guys so much and have a great rest of your day.